Inside the glass tower of Sterling and Associates, Marcus Hayes stood in a conference room where every eye held contempt. 33 years old, worn blazer from a thrift store, scuffed shoes that had walked too many miles, single dad with no degree. The words still hung in the air like smoke. You're wasting our time. His hand touched the door handle. 5 more seconds and he'd be gone. Back to the warehouse. Back to invisible. Then the notification hit every screen in the building. Project Horizon collapsed. $20 million gone. A data error their entire team of PhDs couldn't solve in 3 months. Marcus glanced through the open door at the projection screen and the chaos beyond. Charts, graphs, numbers. His brain caught something in those numbers. Something they had all missed. I know where the error is, the thought formed before he could stop it. The question wasn't whether he was right. The question was whether he had the courage to turn around and tell them. 3 weeks earlier, everything had been different. Marcus had been stacking boxes in the warehouse at 2 in the morning when the job posting appeared on his phone. Data engineer position. Sterling and Associates, one of the top consulting firms in Chicago. He'd stared at the screen for a long time, thumb hovering over the apply button. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Somewhere in the darkness between rows of inventory, a forklift beeped. His daughter would be waking up in 4 hours. He'd promised to make pancakes before Mrs. Patterson arrived. He hit apply before he could talk himself out of it. The morning of the interview, Marcus woke at 5. His apartment was quiet except for the radiator clanking and the distant sound of traffic on Western Avenue. Lily slept on the couch, curled under her favorite blanket with the faded unicorns. She'd stopped asking why she didn't have her own room. Kids learn fast what questions cause their parents pain. He showered quickly, careful not to wake her. The mirror showed a man who looked older than 33. Lines around his eyes from too many late nights, gray starting at his temples. Sarah used to joke that he'd be distinguished when he was older. She'd never gotten to see him past 30. The suit jacket hung on the bathroom door. Carlos Martinez had lent him $60 yesterday, pressed the bills into his hand before Marcus could refuse. For the blazer, hermano. You need to look the part. The thrift store on 7th Street had exactly one jacket in his size. It smelled like mothballs and the elbows were thin, but it was the best he could afford. He'd spent 20 minutes last night polishing his only pair of dress shoes until they looked almost acceptable. The right heel was worn down from years of walking, compensating for the limp he'd developed after Sarah got sick. Stress fracture that never quite healed right. He told himself nobody would notice. Lily was sitting at the kitchen table when he emerged, spooning cereal into her mouth. 6 years old with her mother's dark eyes and the kind of observation skills that made lying impossible. Be good for Mrs. Patterson today. The words came out automatically. Lily looked at his jacket, the tie he'd borrowed from Carlos, the shoes that almost gleamed. She didn't ask where he was going. Didn't ask about the fancy clothes or why Daddy looked nervous. She'd learned not to ask too many questions about money or car or why they lived in a 1-bedroom apartment where she slept on the couch. Okay, Daddy. The milk left a white mustache on her upper lip. Marcus kissed the top of her head, breathing in the smell of her strawberry shampoo, and left before she could see his hands shaking. The walk to the L took 15 minutes. He couldn't afford the Miami-up, and the bus schedule didn't align with his interview time. The October air bit at his face, Chicago wind cutting through the thin jacket. By the time he reached the platform, his fingers were numb. The train rattled through the city. Marcus watched the neighborhoods change through the window. From the worn brownstones of his block to the gleaming towers of the Loop, each stop marking a shift in altitude and aspiration. The other passengers in his car wore real suits, carried leather briefcases, scrolled through phones that cost more than his monthly rent. He belonged in the warehouse, not here. The Sterling and Associates building rose 40 stories of glass and steel, reflecting the morning sun like a blade. Marcus stood on the sidewalk for a full minute, watching people flow through the revolving doors. They moved with the confidence of belonging, none of them checking the address twice or wiping sweaty palms on cheap fabric. The lobby stretched 3 stories high, all marble and polished brass. A sculpture that looked expensive but incomprehensible dominated the center. The receptionist sat behind a desk of dark wood, her makeup perfect, her suit probably worth more than everything in Marcus's closet combined. She looked him up and down when he gave his name. Her eyes lingered on his blazer, on the shoes he'd polished, on the way he stood like someone who wasn't used to standing in lobbies like this. The pause lasted 2 seconds too long. Fourth floor. She didn't smile. The elevator had mirrors on 3 walls. Marcus avoided looking at himself, but caught glimpses anyway. The blazer didn't fit quite right across the shoulders. The tie sat slightly crooked, despite his attempts to fix it. He looked like exactly what he was, a warehouse worker playing dress-up. The conference room was cold, temperatures set to something just uncomfortable enough to keep people alert. 4 people sat behind a long table with bottles of imported water and leather portfolios spread before them. Marcus recognized the setup from the research he'd done online at the public library, since his phone's data plan didn't allow for extensive browsing. The interview panel, the people who would decide if he was worth their time. Jonathan Pierce sat in the middle, head of data, according to his LinkedIn. Harvard MBA. Suit that probably cost $3,000. Watch that, Marcus had looked up online, $15,000. The kind of watch that signaled you'd arrived and everyone else should know it. He glanced at Marcus's resume, 1 page of community college courses and self-taught skills, and set it down like it was contaminated. So, Jonathan's voice carried the boredom of a man who'd already made his decision. Marcus, tell us about your educational background. Marcus's throat went dry. The water bottles on the table might as well have been on the moon. I attended Northwestern University for 3 years. Didn't complete my degree. Rachel Kim, the senior engineer, raised an eyebrow. She had a Yale MBA listed on the company website in the kind of technical brilliance that made her dangerous in meetings. Her expression shifted from neutral to dismissive in the space of a breath. You didn't finish college? No, ma'am. My wife got sick. Leukemia. I had to drop out to take care of her. Dennis Walsh from HR asked the next question, his smile thin and professional and completely empty. And now she passed away 3 years ago. I'm raising our daughter on my own. I'm sorry to hear that. Dennis's tone said he wasn't sorry at all, just following the script of appropriate responses. But you understand we only hire candidates with at least a bachelor's degree. It's company policy. Marcus nodded. He'd known this was coming, had practiced the response in his bathroom mirror at 4 in the morning. I understand, but I've been teaching myself data engineering for 6 years, every night after work. I've built projects, learned Python and SQL, studied machine learning algorithms. I passed your online assessment test. Jonathan leaned back in his chair, the leather creaking. A lot of people pass that test. It's basic screening. What we need here are people with real credentials. People who've been trained by the best institutions. I've built a portfolio. Marcus pulled out his laptop, old and heavy with a crack across the screen that he'd tried to fix with clear tape. I can show you what I've worked on. Rachel barely glanced at it. This looks like something a student would make. I am a student. I'm just not in a classroom. Tell me about gradient descent. Jonathan's challenge came suddenly, designed to catch him off guard. Marcus explained it, the math, the concept, how it optimizes machine learning models by minimizing error through iterative steps. He'd studied this for months, sitting at his kitchen table while Lily slept, testing algorithms on data sets he'd found on Kaggle, debugging code until he understood every variable and parameter. The explanation flowed like water because he'd lived it, built it from scratch, made every mistake possible in the privacy of his 1-bedroom apartment. Jonathan nodded slowly, expression unchanged. That's textbook knowledge. Anyone can read that in a book. What about practical application? Real-world scenarios with messy data and impossible deadlines? I work 3 jobs to support my daughter. Marcus kept his voice quiet, level. I understand messy situations and impossible deadlines. Dennis wrote something in his notes. Why do you think you deserve to be here? This is one of the most competitive firms in the industry. We have candidates from MIT, Stanford, Carnegie Mellon. What makes you think you can compete with that? Marcus looked at the table, at the water bottles he couldn't afford, at the leather portfolios and the degrees framed in their LinkedIn profiles and the certainty in their eyes that he didn't belong. Because I need this job. The words came out steady despite everything. I need it to support my daughter, to give her something better than sleeping on a couch for the rest of her childhood, to show her that working hard matters. that you don't give up just because the world tells you you're not good enough. The room went quiet, not the good kind of quiet where they're impressed, the kind where they'd already made their decision before he walked in and were just being polite by letting him finish. Jonathan stood up, buttoning his suit jacket with the practiced motion of someone who delivered this speech many times. Look, we appreciate you coming in, we really do. But I think it's clear this isn't the right fit. We need people with credentials, with proven track records from reputable institutions. You understand? Marcus understood. He'd understood before he borrowed money for the Blazer, before he practiced his answers in the mirror, before he applied to a position that was always going to be out of reach for someone like him. Thank you for your time. He gathered his laptop, the cheap case scratched and faded, stood up, chair scraping against the polished floor. Nobody offered to shake his hand. The courtesy had been extended by letting him finish the interview. Catherine Reed, the CEO, sat at the end of the table. She'd been silent the entire interview, just watching with dark eyes that gave nothing away. Ice where everyone else showed mere cold. She was 38 according to the company bio, but carried herself with the kind of authority that made age irrelevant. 5 years ago, she'd built Sterling and Associates from nothing, taking clients from her former employer and assembling a team that dominated the Chicago consulting scene. She didn't stop him from leaving, didn't offer meaningless encouragement. Marcus walked to the door, his reflection caught in the glass walls. A man who didn't belong in buildings like this, who'd been foolish to think otherwise. His hand touched the door handle, metal cold against his palm. Then the sound hit, loud, urgent, coming from the conference room next door. The door burst open and 3 senior executives rushed out, faces drained of color. One of them was shouting into a phone, voice cracking with panic. They can't just cancel. We've been working on this for 3 months. Another executive, a woman in a sharp gray suit that probably cost more than Marcus made in a month, was nearly running toward the interview room. We need everyone in the main conference room now. Horizon just collapsed. Jonathan's expression changed instantly, the professional dismissal replaced by something sharper. What do you mean collapsed? The client pulled out. $20 million contract. They said our data model is fundamentally flawed. They're taking their business to Stratton Analytics. Rachel stood so fast her chair fell backward, clattering against the wall. That's impossible. We've triple-checked everything. Multiple rounds of validation. Well, apparently we missed something critical. The woman in gray's voice was ice with an edge of panic underneath, because they just sent us a 10-page report explaining why our retention rate projections are worthless. The board is losing their minds. We need damage control now. People were flooding into the hallway. Phones were ringing. Someone was swearing in the open, professional veneer cracking. The calm, sterile environment of Sterling and Associates had fractured into chaos in under 30 seconds. Marcus stood there with his hand still on the door handle, frozen. Through the open door of the main conference room, he could see a massive projection screen. Charts and graphs and data visualizations filled it. A presentation about customer retention analysis. The same kind of work he'd studied alone in his apartment while Lily slept on the couch. The same algorithms he'd debugged at 3 in the morning. The same patterns he'd trained himself to recognize in the dark hours between midnight and dawn. His brain started working before he could stop it. Pattern recognition, data flow, variable relationships. The things that came automatically after 6 years of teaching himself because he had nothing else, no other path forward. He looked at the retention rate chart on the screen. 91%, a beautiful number, the kind that would make a client sign a $20 million contract without hesitation. But something was wrong. The data points were too clean, too consistent. No real-world data set looked like that without heavy filtering or manipulation. And the baseline variables they were using for active users included login frequency. He could see it right there in the methodology box. But login frequency didn't necessarily mean engagement. Someone could log in every day because of automated email reminders and never actually use the product. They'd show up as active when they were functionally dead users, inflating the numbers. And there was something else. The duplicate user detection methodology, visible in the smaller text on one of the slides. They were using email-based deduplication, standard protocol, but that wouldn't catch users who registered multiple accounts with different emails on the same device. Device fingerprinting was the standard approach for that kind of detection, and it didn't look like they'd implemented it. If they hadn't filtered duplicate accounts properly, their retention rate would be artificially inflated. Maybe by a lot. If 30% of their user base was duplicates and false positives, and their engagement metrics were counting inactive users as active, that 91% could easily be 68 or lower. That was the error. Marcus's hands went cold despite the warmth of the lobby. He could see it clear as daylight, the flaw that had caused a $20 million contract to evaporate. The thing their Harvard and MIT and Stanford graduates had somehow missed in 3 months of work. He could walk away right now, go back to his warehouse job and his delivery shifts and his late nights teaching himself things nobody would ever give him credit for. He could go home to Lily and tell her daddy didn't get the job, but that was okay. They'd figure something out like they always did. Or he could turn around. If he was wrong, they'd humiliate him even worse than they already had. They'd laugh him out of the building. He'd become a story they told at company happy hours about the guy with no degree who thought he could solve their problems in 5 seconds. If he was right, everything could change. Marcus thought about Lily, about the way she never complained when dinner was pasta again, because it was cheap and filled her stomach. About how she'd asked him last week if they could go to the zoo, and he'd said maybe next month, knowing next month wouldn't be any different from this month or the one before. About the way she slept on the couch and told him it was comfortable because she didn't want him to feel bad. He thought about 3 more years of warehouse shifts and aching joints and falling asleep in front of tutorial videos at 3 in the morning. About being invisible to everyone except his daughter. About the slow erosion of hope that came with checking price tags at the grocery store and doing the math in his head before putting anything in the cart. Be brave, Daddy. Lily's voice from this morning, small and certain, before he'd left. Marcus turned around. The conference room was packed now. Jonathan and Rachel and Dennis and a dozen other people crowding around the projection screen, voices overlapping in controlled panic. Catherine stood near the front, arms crossed, face unreadable. Ice Queen surveying the wreckage. Marcus knocked on the door frame. Nobody heard him over the noise. He knocked louder. Jonathan turned, face still red from stress and anger. What? We're in the middle of a crisis here. I know, Marcus's voice was steady even though his heart was trying to break through his ribs. And I think I know where the error is. The conference room went dead silent. 20 people turned to stare at Marcus like he'd just announced he could fly. Jonathan's face shifted from red to purple. What did you just say? I think I know where the error is, Marcus repeated, voice steadier than his hands. In your data model. Rachel let out a sharp laugh, the sound harsh in the sudden quiet. You've got to be kidding me. We have a team of PhDs who've been working on this for 3 months. You looked at a screen for 5 seconds and think you found something we missed? She took a step toward him. Who do you even think you are? Jonathan moved closer, clone expensive and overwhelming. We just rejected you. You don't work here. You don't belong here. And now you're interrupting a crisis to play data analyst. Marcus's jaw tightened. I saw the retention rate chart on your projection, 91%, but the data looks too clean. I think there's bias in your input. Bias? Rachel's voice dripped with contempt. We filtered everything according to industry standards. Multiple rounds of validation, peer review. Where exactly did you get your data science degree that makes you qualified to question our methodology? I don't have one. Marcus kept his voice quiet, refusing to rise to the bait. But I've been studying this for 6 years, every night. And I think you're calculating retention based on active users without properly filtering duplicate accounts and bot registrations. Jonathan moved closer. That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. Do you have any idea how thoroughly we clean our data? We use email-based deduplication, standard protocol. Email-based deduplication doesn't catch users who register multiple accounts with different emails on the same device. The words came out calm, factual. You need device fingerprinting for that. And if you're counting login frequency as engagement without measuring actual product usage, your active user definition is going to inflate your retention numbers. The room went quiet again, but this time it was a different kind of quiet. The kind where people were actually listening instead of preparing their next dismissal. Catherine Reed moved from her position at the back. She'd been silent during the entire interview and through all the chaos. Now she walked slowly toward the front of the room, heels clicking against the marble floor. Everyone stepped aside for her, creating a path without conscious thought. She looked at Marcus for a long moment. Her face gave away nothing, expression carved from ice. You're saying our $20 million project failed because we didn't filter duplicate accounts properly. I'm saying it's a possibility worth checking, and you determined this from looking at a screen for 5 seconds. Marcus met her eyes, refusing to back down now that he'd committed. I determined it from 6 years of teaching myself how to read data while working 3 jobs to support my daughter. Something flickered across Catherine's face, too fast to name. She turned slightly, glancing at Jonathan and Rachel with an expression that was almost amused. Not quite a smile, but something colder, more calculated. Then back to Marcus, her lips curved in that not smile. Okay, the word landed like a challenge, sharp and deliberate. I'll give you 10 minutes. Prove it. She crossed her arms and stepped back deliberately, creating space. The posture of someone watching a performance they already knew would end badly. A teacher giving a student just enough rope to hang himself. Dennis shifted uncomfortably near the door. Rachel's smirk returned, settling into place. Catherine wasn't giving Marcus a chance. She was giving him a stage to fail on. 10 minutes for him to realize he was out of his depth. 10 minutes to embarrass himself so thoroughly he'd leave on his own and never come back. A lesson in knowing your place, delivered in front of witnesses. The room erupted. Dennis spoke first, voice strained. Catherine, you can't be serious. He's not even an employee. This is highly irregular. HR protocols. I'm the CEO, Dennis. Catherine's voice cut through the protest like a blade. Give him the whiteboard. Nobody moved. The room had frozen, 20 professionals caught between shock and disbelief. Give him the whiteboard. Not a request this time. Jonathan's face went rigid, jaw clenched so tight Marcus could see the muscle jumping. He stepped aside with sharp, angry movements. Rachel crossed her arms and leaned against the wall with an expression that said she was watching a car crash in slow motion and couldn't look away. Dennis pulled out his phone and started typing notes, probably documenting this for HR purposes, building the case for why this was Catherine's mistake when it all fell apart. Marcus walked to the whiteboard. His legs felt like water, like he was walking through a dream where the floor might give way any second. 20 pairs of eyes burned into his back. The marker was cold and heavy in his hand, the weight of it somehow more than it should have been. 10 minutes, 600 seconds to prove he wasn't delusional. To prove 6 years of late nights and tutorial videos and practice data sets meant something. To prove he belonged in this room with these people who had every reason to believe he didn't. He wrote the first formula, handshaking, and the numbers came out wrong. The marker squeaked against the board. He erased it, tried again, but his hand wasn't cooperating and his mind was moving too fast or too slow. He couldn't tell which. The pressure crushed down on him like a physical weight, like he was underwater and running out of air. Behind him, someone coughed. It sounded suspiciously like a laugh, quickly covered. Marcus wrote the equation for calculating retention rate. Basic stuff, first-year statistics, but his mind was moving too fast and his hand too slow. The marker kept squeaking against the board in a way that made his teeth hurt. Each stroke a small failure. This is painful to watch. Rachel's mutter wasn't quiet enough, deliberately so. Jonathan checked his watch, the movement exaggerated. 5 minutes gone. Marcus's vision started to blur. The numbers on the board swam together, bleeding into each other. He'd studied this. He knew this, could do it in his sleep. But standing here under these lights with these people watching him fail was different from sitting alone in his apartment with Lily asleep on the couch. Different from the safety of knowing nobody was judging whether you belonged. He thought about going back to that apartment tonight, about telling Lily that Daddy didn't get the job, that the important thing he had to do didn't work out, about another year of warehouse shifts and delivery routes and checking the prices at the grocery store before putting anything in the cart, about being invisible. His hand stopped moving. Then he thought about the look on Lily's face last week when he'd promised they'd go to the zoo next month. The way she'd smiled even though they both knew next month wouldn't be different. The way she believed in him even when nobody else did, even when he wasn't sure he believed in himself. Be brave, Daddy. Marcus erased the entire board, the white powder falling like snow. Jonathan announced the time remaining. 4 minutes. Marcus started drawing, not formulas this time, but a diagram. The flow of data from input to output, each stage represented by a box, each connection by an arrow. He marked where Sterling was pulling their user information, how they defined an active user, what variables they were tracking. His hand moved faster now, muscle memory taking over from conscious thought. Then he circled the gaps, the places where their methodology broke down. No device fingerprinting, just email deduplication, which meant users registering multiple accounts with different emails would be counted as separate unique users. He wrote the number 31% next to it, his best estimate of the inflation that would cause. Login frequency as the primary engagement metric, which meant users who logged in because of automated email reminders but never actually used the product would be classified as active. Another inflation point, impossible to quantify precisely without seeing the raw data, but significant. No segmentation between high-value and low-value users, which meant they couldn't see that their most valuable customers might be leaving at higher rates than their overall numbers suggested. Hidden churn in the metrics that mattered most. He drew arrows showing how each gap compounded the others. How a 31% duplicate rate combined with false engagement signals could make a 68% retention rate look like 91%. The math wasn't complex, just overlooked, hidden in assumptions they'd all made together. Time. Jonathan's voice cut through the silence. Marcus put down the marker. His shirt was soaked through with sweat, sticking to his back. He turned to face the room, every eye on him. I didn't have time to recalculate everything. His voice came out rough, throat dry. But if you check your raw data using device fingerprinting instead of just email deduplication, and if you measure actual product engagement instead of just login frequency, I think you'll find your retention rate is significantly lower than 91%, probably somewhere in the high 60s. Nobody spoke. Jonathan stared at the whiteboard, face gone from purple to a sick gray color that meant he was seeing something he didn't want to acknowledge. Rachel pulled out her laptop, fingers moving fast across the keyboard. She wasn't smiling anymore, wasn't showing contempt. Her expression was concentrated, focused, the look of someone running calculations in their head. Catherine walked up to the board. She studied the diagram Marcus had drawn, traced the arrows with her eyes, read each annotation carefully. The calculated amusement had vanished from her expression, replaced by something sharper, more dangerous. Then she turned to Jonathan. Check it now. Jonathan's jaw clenched. Catherine, this is based on a theory from someone with zero professional experience. We've already validated our methodology multiple times. This is a waste of time we don't have. Check it now, Catherine repeated, voice soft, deadly soft, the kind of quiet that was more threatening than shouting. Jonathan pulled out his laptop with sharp, angry movements. He opened their database, fingers hammering the keys as he wrote a query to pull the raw data. Applied device fingerprinting to identify duplicates, something that should have been done 3 months ago, but hadn't been because everyone assumed email deduplication was sufficient. The room watched in silence as he ran the script. 30 seconds passed, then a minute. Jonathan's face got progressively paler, color draining like someone had opened a tap. Oh God, the whisper was barely audible. Rachel looked over his shoulder at the screen, her expression cracked, professional composure fragmenting. That can't be right. Run it again. Jonathan's voice came out hollow. Duplicate rate is 31%. If we remove duplicate accounts and recalculate based on device fingerprint, he didn't finish the sentence. Didn't need to. What's the actual retention rate, Jonathan? Catherine's question was quiet, precise. 68%. Not 91. The number hung in the air like smoke. Someone swore quietly. Someone else dropped their phone, the clatter loud in the sudden silence. Dennis stopped typing and just stared at Jonathan's screen, mouth slightly open. Rachel's voice was small, stripped of its earlier confidence. That's impossible. We've been working on this for 3 months. We had multiple people review the data cleaning process. We validated everything, and we all made the same assumption. Jonathan's admission came out quiet, defeated. That email deduplication was sufficient. We never thought to check device-level data because it's extra work and we were under deadline pressure and everyone was doing it the standard way. Catherine turned to Marcus. Her expression hadn't changed, but something in her eyes was different now. Sharper, more focused. The cold calculation had transformed into something that might have been respect. You just identified the root cause of a $20 million failure in 10 minutes. Each word deliberate, weighted. The same problem my entire team missed for 3 months. Marcus didn't know what to say. His heart was still trying to break through his ribs, adrenaline making his hands shake. Catherine continued, voice carrying through the silent room. But identifying a problem is different from solving it. You've shown me you can see what others miss. Now you need to show me you can build a solution that actually works. She let that sink in, the implications spreading through the room like ripples. Then she said the words that would change everything. I'm giving you 3 weeks. Build a new model. Prove it works. If you succeed, you stay. If you fail, I personally walk you to the door. The room exploded. Dennis spoke first, voice rising. Catherine, you can't be serious. He doesn't even have a degree. Company policy explicitly requires a minimum of a bachelor's degree for any data position. HR will have a field day with this. Legal will, I'm the CEO. Catherine's voice cut through his protest. I make the policy. Rachel stepped forward, expression shifting between shock and calculation. 3 weeks to rebuild an entire data pipeline? That's not just difficult, it's functionally impossible. We have systems, dependencies, security protocols. He doesn't even have proper access credentials. Database permissions alone will take days to process, then get him credentials. Catherine's tone suggested this wasn't open for debate. Jonathan's voice was tight, controlled fury barely contained. This is insane. We're in crisis mode. And you want to gamble on someone with no professional experience and no degree? What happens when he fails? Because he will fail. This isn't a classroom exercise. This is real work with real consequences. A $20 million hole that we need to fix with actual professionals, not then you'll have 3 weeks to prepare a backup plan. Catherine finally looked at Jonathan, meeting his anger with ice. But I'm giving him the chance. Jonathan, assign him a workspace. Rachel, make sure he has access to the necessary tools and databases. Dennis, handle the paperwork for a 3-week contractor agreement. She turned back to Marcus. 21 days starting now. Show me what you can do. Then she walked out of the conference room. The door closed behind her with a soft click that sounded like a judge's gavel, final and absolute. Marcus stood there holding a whiteboard marker and trying to understand what had just happened. 21 days. 3 weeks to build something their entire team couldn't build in 3 months. 3 weeks to prove he wasn't just lucky, wasn't just someone who'd spotted one obvious thing that should have been caught earlier. Jonathan moved close, voice low and cold enough that only Marcus could hear. Let me be very clear. You got lucky. You spotted something obvious that we overlooked because we were working at scale, dealing with 100 other issues simultaneously. But building a functioning data pipeline in 3 weeks? He paused, letting the impossibility sink in. You're going to crash and burn, and when you do, I'll make sure everyone knows that this was Catherine's mistake, not ours. He walked past Marcus and out the door, shoulder deliberately bumping against his. Rachel followed without a word, face unreadable. Dennis gathered his things and left with a tight smile that was more grimace than anything friendly, already composing the memo in his head about proper HR protocols and liability. The room emptied. Marcus was left alone with a whiteboard full of diagrams and the weight of 21 days pressing down on his shoulders like a physical thing. He pulled out his phone. 2 missed calls from Mrs. Patterson. A text from Lily, sent 20 minutes ago. When are you coming home, Daddy? His fingers shook as he typed back. Soon, sweetheart. Daddy loves you. Then he put the phone away and looked at the whiteboard, at the arrows and circles and numbers that had just changed his life. For better or worse, he didn't yet know. The sun was setting outside the glass walls, Chicago skyline turning golden. Somewhere 40 floors below, people were heading home to families and normal lives. Somewhere in a 1-bedroom apartment across the city, his daughter was probably drawing pictures or watching cartoons or asking Mrs. Patterson when Daddy would be home. 3 weeks, 604 hours, 36,240 minutes to prove he belonged in a world that had spent his entire adult life telling him he didn't. Marcus picked up the marker again and got to work. Day one was hell from the first moment. They gave Marcus a desk in the corner of the open workspace, wedged between the printer that jammed every third job and the emergency exit that people slammed through whenever the fire alarm test ran. No office, no privacy, just a small table with a chair that squeaked and a view of everyone who wanted to watch him fail. Jonathan dropped a hard drive on the surface with enough force to make the desk shake. Over 2 million rows of raw data, 3 months of collection, and exactly 0 instruction manual. 21 days, figure it out yourself. This is your test. Rachel walked by twice in the first hour. Both times she looked through Marcus like he was furniture, something beneath notice. Other employees stared openly, whispered to each other behind monitors and in the break room. Marcus caught fragments of conversation that weren't meant to stay quiet. Who's that guy? Catherine's charity case. I heard he doesn't even have a degree. This is what happens when diversity initiatives go too far. Marcus put in earbuds and started working. The music helped block the noise but couldn't quite cover the weight of 24 professionals deciding he didn't belong. 6 hours just getting system access. The documentation was scattered across multiple internal wikis, each requiring separate login credentials. The database permissions took 3 different approval requests, each one routing through managers who took their time responding because he was temporary, not worth prioritizing. The Python libraries he needed weren't installed on his machine, and the IT ticket took 2 hours to get a response that basically said, figure it out yourself. By midnight, Marcus had written basic scripts to clean the data. The office was empty except for the cleaning crew and one analyst 3 rows over who worked vampire hours. The fluorescent lights hummed. The city lights of Chicago spread out below the windows. Distant and cold. By 3 in the morning, he'd identified the duplicate accounts and removed them from the sample data set. His eyes burned. Coffee had stopped helping 2 hours ago, but the model skeleton was taking shape, the architecture forming in his mind faster than his fingers could code it. By dawn, he'd built a framework for the new approach. The sun came up pink and gold over Lake Michigan, light spilling into the office. Marcus put his head down on the desk for what was supposed to be 5 minutes and woke up 2 hours later with a stiff neck and the cleaning crew vacuuming around him. Day 2 was worse in ways that took longer to recognize. Every system Marcus touched seemed designed to fight him. Database queries timed out after 30 seconds, too short for complex operations. Code that worked perfectly on his laptop failed on the company servers with cryptic error messages. File permissions blocked his access to critical data sets, routing him through approval processes that would take days. Around lunch, Marcus noticed something odd. The query log showed someone had accessed his work files. Modified timestamps on scripts he'd written, changes to permissions on folders he'd created. Small things, easy to miss if you weren't looking. Someone was trying to slow him down. He couldn't prove it, couldn't report it without sounding paranoid. Instead, he added encryption to his files and worked faster. Sleep became something other people did. Day 3, late evening. Marcus was alone in the office, everyone else gone home to families and lives that didn't involve proving they deserved to exist in a space. His phone buzzed. Carlos Martinez. Thought you could use real food, hermano. Carlos appeared 10 minutes later with a bag from Chipotle, the smell of carnitas and cilantro cutting through the office smell of recycled air and desperation. He wore his work clothes, grease stains on the knees from lying under cars all day. Real work, the kind that left marks. Thanks, but I need to keep working. Carlos sat down anyway, unpacking the food. And you need to eat. 5 minutes. They ate in silence for a moment. Marcus hadn't realized how hungry he was until the food hit his stomach. Lily asked me something today. Carlos kept his voice neutral, but the weight was there underneath. She wanted to know if her daddy was going to leave her like her mommy did. Marcus's hands froze halfway to his mouth. She said that? She's 6 years old, Marcus. She's scared. Mom died, now dad's gone all the time. In her head, the pattern's starting to repeat. The burrito turned to ash in Marcus's mouth. He'd thought he was fighting for Lily, building something better. But from her perspective, from the height of a 6-year-old who'd already lost one parent, it just looked like abandonment. Carlos leaned forward. I'm not saying quit. I'm saying remember why you're doing this. His voice dropped, carrying weight. Sometimes the most important thing a man does isn't proving he's right to the world. It's showing up for the people who need him. The words landed like a punch to the solar plexus. Marcus pulled out his phone and called immediately. Mrs. Patterson answered on the third ring. Is everything okay? Can I talk to Lily? She's getting ready for bed, but hold on. The pause felt eternal. Then Lily's small voice came through, careful and quiet. Daddy, hey baby, I'm sorry I haven't been home. It's okay. But her voice said it wasn't, carried the weight of a child trying to be brave for a parent who was already struggling. You're doing your important work. Lily, I need you to know something. I'm not leaving you, ever. You understand? Silence on the other end, then a small sound that might have been a sob being swallowed. Mommy left. The words came out tiny, breaking. She didn't mean to, but she left. Marcus's chest cracked open. I know, sweetheart, but I'm not going anywhere. I'm fighting for us right now. So you can have your own room so we don't have to worry about money. But I will never, never leave you, promise? The word was desperate, needing something solid to hold on to. I promise. Do you trust me? I trust you. I love you to the moon and back. I love you to the moon and back and around the sun 3 times. Their game, their ritual, the thing that meant safe. Marcus hung up and sat there in the empty office with Carlos watching. His eyes were wet. She's been holding that in. Kids hold everything in until it breaks them. Carlos stood, gathered the trash. 2.5 weeks left, hermano. Make it count. But don't lose her while you're winning. After Carlos left, Marcus stared at his screen. The code blurred. He'd been so focused on proving himself to Catherine, to Jonathan, to everyone who'd dismissed him, that he'd forgotten the person who already believed in him. Day 4, late evening, most of the office had cleared out. Marcus was deep in debugging a query when footsteps approached. He looked up to find Catherine standing there with 2 coffee cups. She set one on his desk without asking, pulled over a chair. How's progress? Slower than I'd like. Access issues. That's intentional. Catherine's acknowledgement was casual, like she was discussing the weather. Jonathan's making it difficult. Then why give me this chance if he's going to sabotage it? Catherine took a sip of her coffee, expression thoughtful. Because I need to know if you can survive this environment. This company eats people without pedigree. If you can't handle obstacles now, you won't survive 6 months. Better to find out during the trial period. The logic was brutal and honest. Marcus appreciated the lack of pretense. 15 years ago, I was where you are. Catherine's voice dropped, losing its executive polish. MBA from DePaul, not Harvard. Rejected by 47 companies. When someone finally hired me, everyone called it a diversity hire. Said I was there to check a box, that I couldn't possibly compete with the real talent. What changed? I built a model that grew that company 300% in 2 years. Her smile was sharp, satisfied, proved that potential matters more than pedigree. But I had to prove it every single day for a decade. Every meeting, every project, every interaction was another test I couldn't afford to fail. She stood to leave, paused at the edge of his desk. The coffee's from the good place 3 blocks over, not the swill from our machine. Then she was gone, leaving Marcus with imported coffee and the understanding that this was as close to encouragement as Catherine Reed gave anyone. By the end of day 7, Marcus had the core architecture complete. The data cleaning process was functional, duplicate removal worked across multiple test cases. But critical pieces were missing. Transaction log validation required access he didn't have. Customer lifetime value integration needed legacy system data that was locked behind additional approval layers. Real-time processing capacity was beyond his current infrastructure. He texted Lily every night. Daddy loves you, almost done. She sent back drawings made into emoji art, stick figures and hearts and houses with windows that glowed yellow. 14 days left. The number haunted him. Day 8 started with Marcus staring at an access-denied message that wouldn't go away no matter how many times he submitted permissions requests. Transaction logs. He needed them to validate that the model was accurately predicting user behavior. Without them, he could build a pipeline but couldn't prove it worked. Jonathan walked by at lunch, timing perfect. He looked at Marcus's screen, at the red error text. Having trouble? Transaction logs. I need them for validation. Those require level 3 clearance. Jonathan's explanation was helpful on the surface, malicious underneath. You're level 1 temporary contractor. You'll need to submit a request through the security team. How long does that take? Usually 5 to 7 business days. Marcus's stomach dropped. I have less than 2 weeks left. Jonathan shrugged, the gesture eloquent. Should have thought of that before you made promises you couldn't keep. He walked away, leaving Marcus with a problem that didn't have a good solution. Without transaction logs, the model was incomplete. With the approval timeline, he'd run out of days before gaining access. By evening, Marcus had found a workaround. An older backup of the transaction logs that didn't require level 3 clearance, buried in an archive folder that technically anyone could access but nobody knew existed. The data was 3 months out of date, far from ideal, but better than nothing. He ran validation tests until his eyes burned and the cleaning crew started their rounds. The model worked on historical data, predicted user churn with 83% accuracy, better than the old model's 76. Progress. But there was a problem he couldn't ignore. A critical variable was missing: customer lifetime value data from the legacy CRM system. Without it, the model couldn't distinguish between high-value customers who were about to churn and low-value customers who didn't matter as much to retention strategy. It was the difference between a good model and a great one. The difference between Catherine believing in him and showing him the door. Marcus submitted an access request for the legacy CRM. Got an automated response. Request received. Estimated processing time, 5 to 7 business days. He put his head in his hands. The math was brutal. 7 days for approval, 6 days left until presentation. No matter how he calculated it, the numbers didn't work. Day 11, late night. Marcus was alone in the office, everyone else having abandoned the building hours ago. He tried everything he could think of. Called AT, emailed the database administrator, left voicemails that went unreturned. Nobody responded on a Tuesday night to a temporary contractor's access requests. Rachel appeared at his desk without warning. Marcus tensed, expecting more dismissal. I looked at your code. She didn't sit, stood with arms crossed, defensive posture. Long silence stretched between them. It's good, better than good. The architecture is elegant. Marcus was too surprised to respond immediately. Thank you. I'm not helping you. The clarification came fast, like she needed to establish that boundary. But I'm also not actively sabotaging, not anymore. What changed? You remind me of myself 10 years ago. Rachel's voice went quiet. When I first came here. Yale degree, but still had to prove myself every day. Jonathan convinced me that protecting the status quo was better than supporting talent. He made it about loyalty, about the team, about maintaining standards. And now I think I was wrong. She looked away toward the windows in the city beyond. He's been accessing client data without proper encryption. I noticed it last week but didn't say anything because it was easier not to. But if you're actually building something better, if this isn't just Catherine's experiment, she trailed off. It's not an experiment, it's my life. Rachel nodded once. Watch your file permissions. Jonathan's been in your directories. He doesn't have direct sabotage in him, but he'll slow you down anywhere he can legally justify it. She left before Marcus could say more. The conversation felt like a door opening slightly. Not enough to walk through, but enough to see light on the other side. Day 12, 9 at night, Mrs. Patterson called. Her voice was strained. Lily wants to talk to you. She's been crying. Put her on. Lily's voice came through small and breaking. Daddy, when are you coming home? Soon, baby. I promise. That's what you said last week. Accusation and hurt mixed together. I miss you. I drew you a picture, but you're not here to see it. Marcus's throat closed. Tell me about the picture. It's you and me at the zoo, with elephants. We were going to go, remember? I remember. Are they being mean to you at work? The question came out careful, like she'd been thinking about it for days. Is that why you can't come home? It's not that simple, baby. Do you still want to come home? The fear underneath the words was raw, the terror of a 6-year-old who'd already learned that people leave more than anything. Marcus's voice broke. I'm building something for us, so things can be better. I don't need better. Lily was crying now, really crying. I just need you. The words destroyed him. Carlos had been right. He'd been so focused on winning that he'd forgotten. Winning didn't matter if Lily was broken at the end of it. Can you hold on a little longer? Just a little more? I'll try. But the word held doubt. Catherine appeared in the doorway as Marcus hung up. He didn't know how long that she'd been standing there. You called your daughter. Not a question. She misses me. Catherine sat down in the chair across from him. The overhead lights were off, only his desk lamp and the city glow through the windows providing illumination. It made her look softer, more human. You need the CLV data. Yes. But access takes 5 days minimum. I'm out of time. Catherine pulled out her phone, typed something. A minute later, Marcus's email pinged. Access granted. Legacy CRM system. All permissions. He stared at the notification. Why now? Why not earlier? I needed to see if you'd quit. Catherine's honesty was brutal. If you'd blame the system and walk away, or if you'd find workarounds and keep fighting. You were testing whether I'd break. I was testing whether you understood what it takes to survive here. She leaned forward. You have 9 days. Finish the model. Marcus looked at her, really looked. The exhaustion in her eyes despite the perfect makeup, the lines around her mouth from holding too much in for too long, the absolute control that never wavered, even in private. Why are you doing this? Really? Catherine was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was softer than he'd ever heard it. Because I remember what it's like to be invisible, and I remember the person who finally saw me. She paused at the door. My daughter's name was Sophia. She'd be 8 now. Her voice cracked slightly, the first real break in her armor. Leukemia took her when she was 4. Work is what kept me alive after. Marcus froze. The revelation landed like a physical blow. I'm sorry, so am I. Catherine's eyes were bright, fighting tears that wouldn't fall. But it means I understand what it's like to fight for someone who needs you to survive, to keep going when every part of you wants to give up. Then she was gone, leaving Marcus alone with access credentials and the understanding that Catherine wasn't just betting on his skills. She was betting on shared grief, on the recognition that some losses forge you into something stronger or break you completely. For the first time in 3 years since Sarah died, Marcus felt something shift in his chest. Not just gratitude, something deeper, more complicated. Catherine saw him not because he reminded her of her younger self, but because she understood what it meant to be the last line of defense for someone you loved. He pushed the feeling down. Couldn't afford it. Not yet. Focus on the work. Days 13 and 14 passed in a blur of 20-hour shifts. Marcus pulled the CLV data, integrated it into the model, ran test after test, fixed errors, optimized queries, validated results across multiple scenarios. Lily stayed with Mrs. Patterson. Marcus texted, I love you every night, and got back drawings and hearts and words spelled in 6-year-old phonetics. I miss you, Daddy. Come home soon. By the end of day 14, the model was 90% complete. 7 days left. The number burned in his mind like a countdown to judgment. Day 15, morning. Marcus found an anomaly in the query logs that made his blood run cold. Someone had been accessing client data without proper security protocols. Small amounts, easy to miss in the normal flow of work, but consistent over 3 months, carefully timed to avoid audit triggers. The IP address traced back to the internal network. Someone inside Sterling was feeding information to competitors. It explained why Stratton Analytics had known exactly where to hit, which weaknesses to exploit. They'd had inside help. Marcus traced the access patterns, senior-level credentials, database permissions that required executive authority. The list of people with that kind of access was short, and at the top of it sat Jonathan Pierce. Day 17, Marcus sat in his corner surrounded by evidence he didn't want to see. The data leak wasn't massive, wouldn't show up in routine security sweeps, but it was deliberate, targeted, designed to give Stratton just enough advantage to steal clients without triggering internal alarms. If he reported it now, the presentation would be delayed. The company would go into crisis mode, investigations, board meetings, legal reviews. His 3-week window would evaporate. If he stayed silent, the leak would continue. More clients lost, more damage done. 4 days until presentation. Marcus stared at the evidence on his screen and made the only choice he could live with. He went to Catherine's office at 10 at night. Her assistant was long gone. Catherine worked alone, desk lamp creating a pool of light in the darkness. Marcus knocked on the glass door. Catherine looked up, saw his face. What happened? I found something. Not about the model. He showed her the evidence. The access logs, the patterns, the careful routing that disguised the theft. Catherine's face went stone cold, expression shifting from focused to absolutely lethal in the space of a breath. How long has this been happening? 3 months. Small amounts each time, but consistent. Do you know who? But her tone said she already knew. Someone with senior-level access. Database permissions that require, it's Jonathan. Catherine's words cut through his explanation. Marcus stopped. You knew? I suspected. Couldn't prove it. She stood, walked to the window overlooking Chicago. The skyline glittered in the darkness. 40 stories of glass and steel and ambition. He's been feeding information to Stratton, his former employer. They offered him a CTO position if he brought clients. Why not fire him? Board loyalty. Catherine's voice was bitter. His uncle sits on the board. I needed proof that would stand up to their scrutiny. You just gave it to me, but if we act now, we can't. Catherine turned back to face him. Not until after your presentation. If we move now, Jonathan will sabotage everything. Claim the data leak investigation proves the company is unstable, that hiring you was a desperate move that backfired. The board will use it as ammunition to question my judgment. So we let him keep stealing? For 4 more days. Yes. The decision clearly cost her, but her voice didn't waver. Can you finish the model in that time? With him still here? Yes. Catherine studied him for a long moment. Why do you trust me? The question caught Marcus off guard. He thought about it, really thought. You brought me coffee at 3 in the morning. You told me about Sophia. You see me when everyone else looks through me. Catherine stepped closer. Not far, just enough that the space between them felt charged with something unnamed. I see you because you remind me of who I was. Hungry, brilliant, underestimated. The air in the office felt thick. Marcus was suddenly aware of how close they were standing, how the darkness outside made the space feel private, intimate. I don't know how to do this. Catherine's admission was quiet, vulnerable in a way he'd never heard her. Be CEO and something more. I don't either. Marcus's voice was barely above a whisper. Be engineer and something more. Maybe we figure it out together. Something passed between them, an understanding that went beyond words. The moment stretched, electric with possibility. Then Catherine's phone buzzed on her desk. She glanced at it, stepped back. 4 days, Marcus. Finish the model. The moment broke. Catherine returned to her desk, back to CEO mode. But something had shifted, and they both knew it. Days 18 and 19, Marcus worked around the clock. The model was coming together, each piece clicking into place. Jonathan watched him, suspicious now, feeling the walls closing in. Rachel left documentation on his desk without comment. Small acts of assistance she couldn't quite bring herself to acknowledge openly. Dennis brought coffee one morning, casual comment about the board being impressed he'd made it this far. Marcus saved everything with triple backups, encrypted all his files, made sure nothing could be deleted or corrupted by someone with administrative access. The code was solid, the validation strong. It would work. He was certain now. Day 20, evening. Model complete except for final testing. Marcus ran the last validation series, watching the numbers scroll across his screen. 87% retention prediction accuracy, 84% precision on customer churn identification 30 days in advance. Better than anything Sterling had ever built. He saved everything, backed it up to 3 different locations, then put his head down on the desk and closed his eyes. Just for a moment. When he opened them, it was 2 in the morning. Why? The office was silent except for the hum of servers and the distant sound of traffic. Marcus had been asleep for 3 hours, the first real rest in days. His neck was stiff, back aching from the desk. Tomorrow. The presentation was tomorrow morning. 8 a.m., board members and executives, and Robert Harrington, the client who'd pulled the $20 million contract. The man who would decide if Marcus's 3 weeks had been enough. Marcus went home at 4 in the morning. Not to sleep, just to shower and change into the suit Catherine had arranged for him to borrow. A real suit this time, one that fit, one that didn't smell like thrift stores and desperation. Lily was asleep on the couch with Mrs. Patterson dozing in the armchair, infomercials playing on mute. Marcus kissed Lily's forehead without waking her, breathing in the smell of her strawberry shampoo. Left a note on the counter. Daddy has something important today. I love you. By 6 in the morning, he was back at Sterling, sitting in the empty conference room with his laptop and a presentation he'd thrown together in what little time remained. The slides were simple, basic, nothing like the polished decks the company usually produced. But the model was sound. The data was clean. The results were real. That had to be enough. At 7, people started arriving. Board members in expensive suits, faces Marcus had seen only in the company directory. Senior executives who'd never acknowledged his existence in 3 weeks. Dennis sat up near the door with his laptop, ready to document everything for HR purposes. Rachel came in early, took a seat in the middle row. She met Marcus's eyes and nodded once. Not quite support, but not hostility either. Something in between, a truce. Jonathan entered with his usual confidence, but there was something different underneath. A tension around his eyes, a tightness in his shoulders. He knew something was coming, could feel the shift in the air. He sat front row, waiting. At 7:45, Robert Harrington arrived, CEO of Harrington Analytics, 55 years old with silver hair and a presence that filled rooms. He'd built his company from nothing, made a fortune in retail analytics, and didn't suffer fools. He looked at Marcus the way someone looks at a stain on expensive furniture, something that shouldn't be there. This the guy? His question directed at Catherine. This is Marcus Hayes, lead engineer on Horizon Recovery. Robert's skepticism was palpable. 3 weeks to fix what took 3 months to break. This should be interesting. Catherine was the last to enter, dressed in dark navy, every hair in place, absolute control radiating from her like heat. She sat at the head of the table and gestured for everyone to settle. The room quieted. 20 pairs of eyes turned to the front. Marcus stood, legs hollow, and connected his laptop to the projection screen. His daughter was home waiting. His career hung on the next hour. 3 weeks of work, 6 years of self-teaching, 33 years of being told he wasn't good enough. Time to prove them all wrong. The first slide appeared on the screen. No fancy graphics, no corporate polish. Just a title in simple font. Why we got it wrong, and how we fixed it. Marcus's hands steadied as he began. 3 weeks had prepared him for this moment, or destroyed him. Time to find out which. 3 weeks ago, this company told a client their retention rate was 91%. That number was based on careful analysis by experienced data scientists with advanced degrees from the best schools in the country. He paused, letting the room absorb that. It was also completely wrong. Robert Harrington shifted in his seat. Jonathan's jaw tightened. Catherine's expression remained neutral, but Marcus caught the slight tension in her shoulders. The error wasn't in the model itself, it was in the input. He clicked to the next slide showing the data flow diagram. We were measuring active users based on login frequency, but logging in doesn't mean engagement. Someone can log in every day because of automated email reminders and never actually use your product. They're counted as retained users when they're functionally gone. One of the board members leaned forward, older man with sharp eyes. That's basic methodology. Surely we accounted for that. We thought we did. Marcus kept his voice steady, factual. And there was a second issue. The deduplication process used email matching. But users who create multiple accounts with different emails on the same device were counted as separate individuals. Robert frowned. Our tech team raised that concern during the initial meetings. Your people told us it was handled. It wasn't. Marcus clicked to the next slide, showing the actual numbers. Email-based deduplication caught obvious duplicates. But it missed users operating multiple accounts across the same hardware. That inflated the user base by 31%. Rachel was staring at her hands. Jonathan had gone very still, the kind of stillness that comes before explosion or collapse. When you combine these two errors, you get retention numbers that look amazing. 91%, any executive would sign off on that, but the real number was 68%. Marcus let that sink in. That 23-point gap is the difference between success and failure, between a $20 million contract and losing it. The silence in the room was absolute. Dennis had stopped typing. The board members exchanged glances that carried weight. So what's your solution? Robert's question cut through the quiet, demanding substance. Marcus advanced to the architecture slide. Device fingerprinting instead of email for deduplication. Engagement scoring based on actual product usage, not just login frequency. Customer lifetime value integration, so we can identify high-value users at risk of churning before they leave. He clicked through the technical details. Predictive analytics that can flag potential churn 30 days in advance with 84% precision. The old model told you who had already left. Marcus looked directly at Robert. This model tells you who's about to leave while there's still time to intervene, and it focuses your retention efforts on the users who actually matter to your bottom line. What kind of accuracy are we talking about? A board member asked. 87% for retention prediction, 84% precision on churn identification, tested on 3 months of historical data with validation across multiple user segments. How do we know this isn't just retrofitted to historical data? Another board member challenged. That it'll actually work going forward? Marcus met the challenge directly. You don't. Not until you test it in production. But I can show you the validation methodology. Cross-testing across different time periods. Edge cases I accounted for. And I can walk you through exactly how the model handles new users versus established users versus declining users. For the next 20 minutes, Marcus broke down the technical details. Board members asked pointed questions about scalability, about processing speed, about edge cases and error handling. Marcus answered each one, showing his work, explaining his reasoning. When he didn't know something, he said so plainly, I don't have that data, but here's how I would test it. When he'd made assumptions, he labeled them clearly. This is an assumption based on industry standards, but it can be verified by, it wasn't a sales pitch. It was a technical presentation by someone who understood the work at a fundamental level, who'd built it with his own hands in 3 weeks of sleep deprivation and determination. Robert raised his hand. Can I get a copy of the documentation? Marcus sent it immediately, email already prepared. Robert stood, gathering his things. Give me 10 minutes to review this with my team. He walked out with 2 analysts. The conference room door closed behind them with a soft click. Immediately, quiet conversations erupted. Board members huddled together, voices low but urgent. Jonathan and Rachel were having an intense whispered exchange. Marcus sat down, suddenly aware of how exhausted he was. 3 weeks of pressure released in 30 minutes of presentation, but the verdict still hung in the air. Catherine caught his eye from across the room. She gave a single small nod. Not approval, just acknowledgement. You did the work. Now we wait. The 10 minutes felt eternal. Marcus checked his phone. A text from Mrs. Patterson. Lily wants to know how it went. What should I tell her? Tell her Daddy did his best. Love you, sweetheart. He typed back, then added, see you soon, promise. When Robert returned, his expression was carefully blank. He sat down, looked directly at Marcus. I've reviewed your methodology with my team. We have questions about scalability for larger data sets, concerns about real-time processing under peak load conditions. Each point felt like a nail being driven in, but the core approach is sound, better than sound. It's what we should have had 3 months ago. Marcus felt something loosen in his chest. Not celebration yet, but the first breath after drowning. Robert turned to Catherine. But I'm not signing a $20 million contract today. The air left the room. Catherine's expression didn't change, but Marcus saw her fingers tighten almost imperceptibly on the table edge. We'll do a 2-month pilot test. Robert's terms came out measured. Final. You implement this model on one of our secondary product lines. If it performs as promised, we reinstate the full Horizon contract. Same terms, $20 million over 2 years. But if it fails, we walk. Permanently. Catherine stood, extended her hand without hesitation. Agreed. They shook. The board members started talking over each other, questions about implementation timelines and resource allocation. Someone started clapping, awkward in the sudden shift from tension to tentative celebration. Robert held up his hand for silence. But I want him as lead engineer. He pointed directly at Marcus. Not as a consultant. Full-time employment. This is his model. He should be the one to implement it. Jonathan's face went sheet white. Rachel looked surprised but not displeased. Dennis was already pulling up employment templates on his laptop. Done. Catherine's voice carried absolute authority. Marcus Hayes, lead data engineer, reports directly to me. Implementation starts Monday. The meeting dissolved into logistics discussions. Marcus sat there trying to process what had just happened. Not the full contract, not immediate vindication, but something better. A real chance, a legitimate test, with his name on it. The room gradually cleared. Board members filtered out to other meetings. Executives dispersed to handle the operational details of standing up a pilot program. Dennis left with a stack of paperwork and a bemused expression. Rachel paused at the door. She looked back at Marcus. That was solid work. The admission cost her something, but she gave it anyway. Welcome to the team, Hayes. Then she was gone, leaving Marcus and Jonathan and Catherine in the aftermath. Jonathan approached slowly. His face carried a strange mix of anger and resignation, defeat settling into the lines around his mouth. Congratulations. The word came out flat. You fooled everyone. I didn't fool anyone. I did the work. We'll see how long that lasts. Jonathan's voice dropped to something harder. First mistake you make, I'll be there, and you will make mistakes. Everyone does. Catherine's voice cut across the room like a blade. Jonathan, my office, now. Jonathan flinched. He looked at Marcus one more time, something complicated in his expression. Not just hatred, something more like grief for a position he'd known was already lost. Catherine's office was all glass and steel, with a view of Chicago that made the rest of the world seem small. Jonathan stood by the window. Marcus stood near the door with Dennis, who'd been called in as witness. Catherine sat behind her desk with a folder that looked official and damning. Marcus found something interesting while building the model. Catherine opened the folder, spread documents across her desk. Data breach, 3 months. Internal source with senior-level access. Jonathan's face shifted. Defiant first, then pale, then trapped. You can't prove that. Your former employer. Catherine's words were surgical, precise. Stratton Analytics, where you had a CTO offer waiting if you brought clients. Dennis spoke up, voice professionally neutral. We have your emails, Jonathan. I'd flagged them yesterday as part of routine security audit. Encrypted communications to Stratton servers. Data transfers that bypass normal protocols. The silence stretched. Jonathan looked out the window at the city below, the skyline he'd helped build Sterling to dominate. I built this department. His voice came out quiet, hollow. Hired everyone, created all the processes, established the standards that made us competitive. And then you sold those standards to our competitors. Catherine's response was ice. Jonathan turned, and for the first time, Marcus saw something other than antagonism in his face. Pain. Real, genuine pain. You brought in someone with no degree to replace me, after everything I've done. After years of building this company's reputation. His voice cracked slightly. He's good, isn't he? Better than me? The question hung in the air, vulnerable and raw. Not the voice of a villain, but of a man watching his relevance evaporate in real time. Catherine's expression softened fractionally. He identified in 10 minutes what you missed in 3 months. He built in 3 weeks what you couldn't build in 3 years. But that's not why you're leaving. You're leaving because when you got scared of being surpassed, you chose to tear down instead of build up. Her voice carried disappointment more than anger. And that's something I can't allow in my company. Dennis handed Jonathan a document. Security will escort you out. Effective immediately. Your severance package is outlined here. It's generous given the circumstances, but contingent on signing the non-compete and NDA. Jonathan took the papers with shaking hands. He looked at Marcus one last time. Good luck. You're going to need it. Not threatening this time, just bitter, resigned. Then he was gone, escorted by 2 security officers who'd been waiting in the hall. The office felt larger without him. Catherine stood, walked to the window, looked out at the city. Marcus stayed by the door, uncertain whether he should leave or wait. He wasn't wrong. Catherine's voice was quiet. You are better than him. That's what scared him most. I feel like I should feel worse about that. Don't. She turned to face him. Empathy is fine. Guilt is wasted. You didn't take his job. He gave it away when he chose betrayal over growth. Dennis cleared his throat. I'll leave you two. Marcus, come by HR tomorrow. We have paperwork. Then it was just Catherine and Marcus in the office with Chicago sprawling below, and 3 weeks of pressure finally released into the space between them. You did it. Catherine's words were simple, carrying weight. Saved the company, caught the leak, earned your place. I had help. Marcus looked at her directly. You gave me access when you didn't have to. You brought me coffee at 3 in the morning. You told me about Sophia. Catherine stepped closer. Not far, just enough that the distance between them shifted from professional to something else. You know why I gave you this chance? Because I reminded you of yourself. That's part of it. She paused, weighing words. But there's more. When my daughter Sophia was sick, I had to drop everything. I was a junior analyst at Stratton. Had to choose between career and my child. Her voice dropped lower, more vulnerable. I chose Sophia. They fired me, said I wasn't committed. 3 years watching her fight leukemia, and when she died, I had nothing. No job, no career. Just grief. Marcus waited, letting her find the words. Someone gave me a chance when I had no credentials left. Just determination. Catherine's eyes were bright. That person was Robert Harrington. He hired me 15 years ago when nobody else would. I built his company's first data infrastructure. When I left to start Sterling, he was my first client. The revelation clicked into place. The whole thing was a test. He wanted to see if you'd do for someone else what he did for you. And you proved I was right. Catherine smiled, real smile instead of the calculated one she used in meetings. I've been CEO for 5 years, built this company from nothing. But I've been alone the entire time. Work kept me alive after Sophia. She looked at him directly. But it's not life. It's just survival. Marcus stepped closer. They were near enough now that he could smell her perfume, something subtle and expensive. I see you, Catherine. Not just the CEO, the person who brought coffee because she knew what it meant to fight alone, who told me about her daughter because she understood loss. I don't know how to do this. Catherine's admission was barely above a whisper. Be the person who runs this company and the person who wants... She trailed off. Marcus finished for her. Something more? Yes. I don't either. Be the engineer proving himself every day and the father and the man who... He stopped. Catherine reached out, fingers brushing his hand. Who feels something he hasn't felt in 3 years, since Sarah died? Yes. The moment stretched between them, electric and terrifying and full of possibility. Almost a kiss, but not quite. Something held them both back. Fear of loss, fear of hope, fear of wanting something that could be taken away. Catherine's phone buzzed on her desk. The spell broke. She stepped back, professional mask sliding into place. Board meeting in 5 minutes. We need to discuss pilot implementation. Right, of course. But they both knew something had shifted. The door had opened just slightly, enough to see what might be on the other side. Saturday dinner? Catherine's question came out casual but careful. If you want, you and Lily, I'd like to meet her. She's the reason I'm here, I know. That's why I want to meet her. Marcus smiled, real smile for the first time in 3 weeks. We'd like that. Catherine gathered her materials for the meeting. HR tomorrow. Monday you start implementation. 2 months to prove the model works in production. Understood. And Marcus? She paused at the door. Thank you for showing me that taking chances on people still matters. Then she was gone, leaving Marcus alone in the office with Chicago below and a future that suddenly seemed less like survival and more like living. Dennis met Marcus in the hallway with a folder thick with documents. Employment contract. Lead data engineer position. Salary is $125,000 annually. Benefits start day 1. Stock options vest over 4 years. Performance bonuses tied to the pilot results. Marcus took the folder with hands that didn't quite feel real. $125,000, more money than he'd made in the last 3 years combined. There's something you should understand. Dennis's voice dropped, becoming more human than HR professional. This won't be easy. Rachel will question your decisions. Board members will be watching everything. Some people will always see you as the guy who got hired without credentials. I know. Catherine already told me. Then you also know you'll have to prove yourself every single day. Dennis smiled slightly. But between us, I'm glad you're here. Company needed someone willing to challenge assumptions. Marcus signed the papers. His signature looked strange on the official documents, like he was signing someone else's name. Monday morning, 7 a.m. Your office is on the 40th floor. Dennis handed him a keycard. Welcome to Sterling and Associates, Mr. Hayes. Marcus left the building at 2 in the afternoon. The October sun was bright. Chicago stretched around him in all directions. 3 weeks ago, he'd walked into this building certain he didn't belong. Now he was walking out with an employment contract and a future that felt possible. He called Mrs. Patterson from the sidewalk. Is Lily there? She's doing homework. You want to talk to her? Yes, please. A rustle of movement, then Lily's small voice. Daddy. Marcus's throat went tight. Hey, sweetheart, how would you like to go to the zoo today? Really? The word exploded with joy. Really, really? Really? Daddy finished his important work. We can go see the lions and the elephants and get ice cream. Can we get 2 scoops? Marcus smiled through tears. We can get 3 scoops if you want. Lily squealed with delight, the sound pure and perfect. I'll get ready. Hurry home, Daddy. One more thing, baby. How would you like your own bedroom? With walls you can paint any color? Silence on the other end. Then quietly. For real? Not pretend? For real. Everything's going to be different now. You did it. You won. Lily's voice was awestruck, believing in her father's invincibility again. We did it. You kept believing in me when I stopped believing in myself. I always believe in you, Daddy. I know. That's what saved me. Marcus picked up Lily an hour later. She burst out of the apartment door and threw herself into his arms with enough force to nearly knock him over. She changed into her favorite dress, the one with flowers that she saved for special occasions. The zoo was crowded with Saturday families, kids running between exhibits, parents chasing with snacks and wipes and infinite patience. Marcus and Lily walked slowly, stopping at every animal, reading every placard. She wanted to know everything about the elephants, how much they weighed, what they ate, whether they remembered things like people said. Do they miss their families when they're far away? I think they do, but they also learn to be happy in new places. Lily processed this. Like us? We were sad about Mommy, but now we can be happy again? Marcus stopped walking, knelt down to her level. Yes, baby, exactly like us. We'll always miss Mommy, but we can still be happy. Are you happy now, Daddy? I am. Are you? Lily threw her arms around his neck. I am now. I missed you so much. I missed you too. I'm sorry I was gone so long. But you came back. You promised and you came back. They got ice cream, 3 scoops each, chocolate and strawberry and vanilla. More than either of them could actually eat. Lily got it all over her dress and face and hands. Marcus didn't care. The sticky happiness was worth dry cleaning. They sat on a bench outside the elephant habitat as the sun set, Lily leaning against his shoulder, exhausted and content. The Chicago skyline was visible in the distance, the Sterling building among them, 40 stories of glass reflecting the orange light. 3 weeks ago, Marcus had been stacking boxes, borrowing money for thrift store blazers, telling Lily maybe next month about the zoo. Now his daughter had 3 scoops of ice cream melting down her chin and the promise of her own room. Now he had a job title and a salary that meant stability. Now he had a chance at something that looked like a life instead of just survival. Daddy? Lily's voice was drowsy. Are the mean people gone now? Some of them. And the ones who are left aren't so mean anymore. Good. I don't like people being mean to you. Me either, sweetheart. But sometimes people are scared and that makes them mean. It doesn't excuse it, but it helps to understand it. Were you scared? Terrified. But you did it anyway. I had to. For you. Lily was quiet for a moment, then very seriously. You know what Mommy used to say? She said brave isn't not being scared. Brave is being scared and doing it anyway. Marcus's eyes burned. Your mom was right about that. She was right about you too. She said you were the strongest person she knew. The tears fell then. Couldn't stop them. Sarah's voice in their daughter's words, reaching across 3 years of absence to remind him who he was. I love you, Lily. To the moon and back. I love you to the moon and back, and around the sun 3 times and to all the stars. Their ritual had evolved, grown larger. Room for more love, more distance, more possibility. They stayed until the zoo closed, then took the train home. Lily fell asleep against his shoulder, ice cream stains and pure contentment. Marcus carried her up the stairs to their apartment, the building looking different now. Not home forever, just home for now. They could move, find a two-bedroom in a better neighborhood, give Lily the room she deserved. Everything was different. Everything was possible. 6 weeks later, Marcus stood in the Sterling boardroom presenting pilot results. Robert Harrington sat at the head of the table with 8 board members and Catherine. The numbers on the screen told the story. Model accuracy in production, 89%. Better than the 87 we tested in development. Marcus clicked through the results. Predicted customer churn with 86% precision. Saved $4.2 million in retention costs over 2 months. Robert nodded slowly. That's significant improvement over historical performance. The model scaled better than expected. Real-time processing under peak loads stayed within acceptable parameters. Edge cases we didn't anticipate in development were handled gracefully by the fallback systems. A board member spoke up. What about false positives, customers flagged as at risk who weren't actually leaving? 14%, within industry standards and significantly lower than comparable systems. Robert stood. Based on these results, Harrington Analytics is reinstating the Horizon contract. Full $20 million, same terms as originally negotiated. Applause around the table. Catherine allowed herself a small smile. Marcus felt the weight of 2 months lift off his shoulders. After the meeting, Marcus found Rachel in the break room. She was making coffee, movements efficient and practiced. Nice work on the pilot. She poured a second cup without asking, handed it to him. Your architecture handled the load better than I expected. Your documentation helped. The edge case handling you left on my desk that first week saved me a lot of debugging time. Rachel was quiet for a moment. I wasn't sure you'd notice that. I noticed. Thank you. I'm still not convinced you should be lead engineer without a degree. Her honesty was blunt but no longer cruel. But I'm also not convinced that matters as much as I used to think it did. You do good work, Hayes. That counts for something. It wasn't friendship, but it was respect, hard-earned and genuine. Marcus's team met in his office every morning. 3 junior engineers, all fresh out of college, all watching him with varying degrees of skepticism and hope. One of them raised his hand like they were in class. Is it true you don't have a degree? It's true, but you're lead engineer on a $20 million project because I spent 6 years teaching myself every night while working 3 jobs. Because I learned to solve real problems with messy data and impossible deadlines. A degree would have helped, but the work is what mattered. And another engineer, young woman with Yale on her resume, asked the harder question. How do we know you're not just lucky? That you didn't just spot one obvious thing and get promoted beyond your capability? You don't know yet. Marcus met her challenge directly. I have to prove it to you every day. Just like you have to prove to me that Yale taught you something beyond how to interview well. We're all proving ourselves constantly. That's how this works. What if we make mistakes? Then you learn from them. I don't care where you went to school. I care that you solve problems, treat people with respect, and keep learning. Do those things and we'll work well together. They nodded, still uncertain but willing to see where this went. Saturday evening arrived with the nervousness of a first date. Marcus's new apartment was in Lincoln Park. 2 bedrooms. Lily's room painted the pink she'd chosen with absolute certainty. She'd spent the last hour changing outfits, asking if each one was pretty enough for meeting Miss Catherine. You look beautiful no matter what you wear, sweetheart. But this is important. You like her. Marcus knelt down to Lily's level. I do like her. Does that bother you? Lily considered this seriously. Is she nice? She is. Is she nice to you? Because some people weren't nice and that made me sad. She's very nice to me. She helped me when nobody else would. Then I think I'll like her too. The doorbell rang. Marcus answered to find Catherine standing there with Thai food and visible nerves. She'd dressed casually, jeans and a sweater, trying not to look like a CEO meeting her lead engineer's daughter. Lily appeared from behind Marcus. You're Miss Catherine. Daddy talks about you. Catherine smiled, genuine warmth instead of professional polish. Good things, I hope. He says you're really smart and pretty. Lily's announcement was matter-of-fact, 6-year-old honesty without filter. Marcus felt his face burn. Lily. Catherine laughed, the sound free and unguarded. Well, your daddy is pretty smart and handsome, too. Lily giggled, warming immediately. Come see my room. I painted it myself. Well, Daddy helped, but I picked the color. She grabbed Catherine's hand and dragged her toward the bedroom, chattering about the zoo and her drawings and how she had her own bed now instead of the couch. Catherine looked back at Marcus with an expression that said help, but also, this is perfect. Dinner was Thai food spread across the living room floor because Lily insisted it was more fun that way. They ate pad thai and spring rolls while Lily explained her drawings in exhaustive detail. Catherine listened with the same focus she brought to board meetings, asking questions, remembering details. This one is you and Daddy at the zoo. And who's this? Catherine pointed to a third stick figure. That's you, because you helped Daddy and now you're friends. Catherine looked at Marcus, something soft in her expression. I'd like to be friends with both of you. Then you have to come to the zoo with us next time. Lily's logic was absolute. That's what friends do. I love that. After Lily went to bed, Marcus and Catherine sat on the balcony with coffee. The Chicago night spread before them, lights and sound and possibility. She's wonderful. Catherine's voice was quiet. You've done an incredible job with her. Most days I feel like I'm making it up as I go. That's parenthood. I remember. She trailed off. Marcus waited. Sophia would have been 8 now. Same age Lily will be in 2 years. Catherine's voice cracked. Some days I can't remember her voice. That terrifies me more than anything. Marcus reached over, took her hand. Tell me about her. So Catherine did. Talked about Sophia's laugh, about how she loved dinosaurs and wanted to be a paleontologist. About the way she'd insisted on wearing her tutu to the hospital for chemo because pretty clothes made the medicine work better. About the last time they'd gone to the zoo together, 3 months before the end. I haven't talked about her like this in years. Catherine wiped her eyes. Everyone at work knows she existed, but nobody asks. It's easier for them to pretend I don't have that pain. It's easier for them. Not for you, no. Not for me. They sat in comfortable silence, hands linked, watching the city breathe. I don't know how to do this. Catherine spoke into the quiet. Build something with someone when I'm terrified of losing them. I don't either. Marcus squeezed her hand, but maybe we figure it out together. Slowly. No pressure, just seeing where it goes. I'd like that. Me too. Catherine leaned her head on his shoulder. Marcus wrapped his arm around her. They stayed like that until the coffee went cold. 2 people who'd survived loss finding tentative hope in each other. 2 months became 3, became 4. The pilot expanded to full implementation. Marcus's team grew to 7 engineers. The Horizon contract delivered everything promised and more. Board meetings stopped being inquisitions and became progress reports. Rachel invited Marcus to lunch one afternoon, picked a quiet place away from the office. They talked about architecture and algorithms and gradually into territory more personal. I owe you an apology. Rachel's words came out stiff, unpracticed. I was threatened by you because you represented everything I'd been taught didn't matter. Skills without credentials, talent without pedigree. It forced me to question whether the things I built my identity around actually meant what I thought they did. You don't have to apologize. I understand institutional pressure. I do, though, because I let that fear make me cruel. That was my choice, Marcus nodded. Apology accepted. For what it's worth, I'm glad you're here. The work is better. The team is better. I'm better. That means something coming from you. Good, because I mean it. They walked back to the office together. Not quite friends, but something close enough to matter. Carlos came by the new apartment one evening, brought beer and congratulations. He looked around at the space, at the kitchen that was actually separate from the living room, at Lily's bedroom with her name on the door. You did it, hermano. Actually pulled it off. Couldn't have done it without you. The $60, the pep talks, watching Lily when I needed. Carlos waved him off. That's what brothers do. Blood or chosen, doesn't matter. They drank beer on the balcony while Lily showed Catherine how to play her favorite video game inside. Catherine was terrible at it, dying repeatedly, but Lily's laughter was worth the frustration. She's good for you. Carlos nodded toward Catherine. Both of them are. I know. It's terrifying. Love usually is. especially after loss. Is it love? It's only been a few months. Carlos looked at him with the wisdom of someone who'd seen combat and come home. Love isn't about time. It's about seeing someone completely and choosing them anyway. You see her, she sees you. That's rare. Marcus watched Catherine through the window, completely focused on Lily's instructions about game controls. Professional mask entirely gone. Yeah, it is. 6 months after the presentation, Marcus stood in his office on the 40th floor preparing for another meeting. His phone buzzed. Catherine, dinner tonight? My place? I'm cooking. You cook? I'm attempting to cook. Results uncertain. Backup pizza number on speed dial. Marcus smiled. We'll be there. Catherine's townhouse was in Gold Coast, 3 stories of restored brownstone with original molding and a kitchen that looked like it belonged in a magazine. She answered the door wearing an apron, flour in her hair. It's going poorly. Her admission was immediate. The recipe said intermediate. It lied. Lily peeked into the kitchen. Can I help, please? I need all the help I can get. They cooked together, Lily on a stool explaining patiently how to measure flour, Catherine following instructions with the same intensity she brought to board presentations. Marcus watched from the doorway, heart full to breaking. This was what Sarah had wanted for him. Not just survival, but life, joy, connection. The chance to build something new without forgetting what came before. Dinner was only slightly burnt lasagna and perfectly fine salad. They ate at Catherine's dining table, Lily telling stories about school, Catherine sharing carefully edited work anecdotes. Normal, domestic, good. After Lily fell asleep on Catherine's couch, too comfortable to want to leave, Marcus and Catherine stood in the kitchen doing dishes. I need to tell you something. Catherine's voice was careful. I'm falling in love with you, with both of you, and that terrifies me because I know how much it hurts to lose people. Marcus set down the dish towel, pulled her close. I'm terrified too, but I'm also tired of letting fear make decisions. Sarah used to say that brave isn't not being scared. Brave is being scared and doing it anyway. Your wife was wise. She was. And she'd tell me that wasting this chance because I'm afraid would be the real tragedy. Catherine looked up at him. So what do? We try. We build something together. We figure it out as we go. Even though it's scary, especially because it's scary, the good things usually are. Marcus kissed her then, properly kissed her for the first time. 6 months of tension and possibility resolving into certainty. When they broke apart, Catherine was crying. Happy tears. In case you were wondering. Good tears are allowed. They stood there in her kitchen, holding each other, while Lily slept peacefully in the next room, and Chicago breathed around them. 2 people who'd lost everything finding courage to build again. Marcus remembered standing outside Sterling 6 months ago, hand on the door handle, deciding whether to turn around. The moment that changed everything. Not because he was special or chosen or destined, because when the world told him he didn't belong, he chose to prove it wrong. Success isn't about credentials or pedigree or the right schools. It's about the willingness to fight when everyone tells you to quit. About people who are brave enough to give you a chance, and brave enough to take a chance on them back. From warehouse worker to lead engineer. From rejected to essential. From alone to this, Catherine's arms, Lily's laughter, a life that felt earned. The journey wasn't over. There would be more challenges, more proving himself, more moments of doubt. But Marcus had learned something in those 3 weeks of hell. He belonged anywhere he decided to fight for. And he was done being invisible.